Okay, so um continuing the video, I mentioned, sloppiness and, like person's behavior and whether they tolerate, maybe being treated as less than, and hierarchy of any kind. I'm not saying that there is one. And if that's what they want, right? If that's what they want out of their life, they want, I would almost argue like 9 to 5 corporate, um, spreadsheets and, printing shit and all that. I mean, that isn't a terrible way to live, depending on who you ask, right? Depending on who you ask, that's not a terrible way to live. Some people might be able to live that way, right? They could tolerate that, living that way, and they could enjoy it, right? But for me personally, I wouldn't do this whole spreadsheet and the whole computer and the typing thing. Not only because it's very matrix like you're achieving very little. That's why the matrix even exists, because it's like you're living in a welfare situation. And I mentioned in the previous video, like, like at 6 years old, right, you haven't earned any money, you haven't contributed anything to society, and you go through the school system, and you're achieving very little, and all I see in return is, humiliation. It's like you set up yourself for failure, right? It's like as if the world that you were prepared for doesn't even exist. The world, you thought you were in, doesn't exist, and it has no relatability. Anything you learn in elementary school, all those 8 years were just a waste of time. Maybe they wanted to waste your time intentionally, but honestly, I say this with, with all due respect, that, like, at least in my case, I think I shouldn't exist, right? Everybody has the right to feel sorry for themselves, and everybody, uh, everybody likes to feel sorry for themselves for one reason or another, and they all want to, feel like they are the underdog, and they're fighting, overcoming some kind of force. And this all comes down to, like, even situational awareness, knowing what good and evil is, and morality, and how the modern world is very skewed on that, because there's a lot of, like, history that kind of contradicts those, and people contradicted and lied. People can lie all the time, right? People can say one thing about to you in your face, but then they can have something completely different in their mind. So that's just the average human being. But in reality, right, I don't, I've been pretty honest. I have admitted that I do have things at the back of my mind that I don't say to other people, but, you know excuse me, I can have a thought at the back of my mind, and that's completely different from what I said in person, right? Just because you say something in a certain voice, or you say it a certain way, doesn't mean anything, right? Because the person can be anyone or be anything. It's just like when you're online, right? The person can change their name, they can change profile pictures, they can lie to everything about themselves online, right? And they can be a bully online. That's how cyberbullying came about, and it's a serious thing because it actually happened, right? 2010, I read all about it nationwide. It's not just it's not just it's not just me rambling about these issues that have been going on for years. And obviously it's clear that, a lot of people, they haven't taken any action, they haven't done anything to fix, the to in order to fix the issues of the past, right? These things happen, and uh but there's very little done, right? And people are complaining, they're obviously looking for someone to blame. um and of course these videos sound like I'm complaining. There's so many issues to complain about, right? And the sloppiness of the government, and in general, just, like, I think, I get it. Human sloppiness is like, I get it. Like, you ask for one thing, and you ask for, I need a burger that, with this, and it has to be cooked to this amount in this amount of time. And then the person messes it up, and they do something completely different. They don't do what you asked for. They don't do it properly, right?